we were created special by God to have fellowship with him. He wanted, but he didn't want it to be without choice.
Yeah.
He wanted it to be voluntary. He wanted us to love him enough to communicate directly with him and to hear directly from him. Adam spoke directly with God.
Faith and Failures Podcast.
Now, I have 3 questions. One, I have heard someone say, and it was a commercial for them giving theological discussion. So apparently they thought they were well-versed, because what they said was this, and they kind of mocked it when it said, the Bible said serpent, and serpents crawl on their belly. Then if that's the case, then why was the serpent cursed to crawl on its belly if that's what it does?
Apparently the serpent didn't crawl in the dust.
That's what I was thinking. I was like, that's kind of obvious, but this is a guy who is on giving classes for theology. And that's what he said in the commercial for that theology. And I'm like, that seems kind of like a no-brainer.
The only natural assumption you could take from the word was that the serpent was a very attractive beast, whether it looked like a snake does today or not, or whether it was totally transformed from that point forward to crawl in the dust and eat of the dust and so forth. It's all we can do is take what the word says and know that that's what it is. The serpent, whatever he looked like at the time and whatever his practices were at the time, the thing you think about it, one of the most remarkable things is nobody was surprised that the serpent spoke.
That's true.
That's always blown my mind. It's just like when Balaam, when his donkey spoke to him, they said, He wasn't taken back by the fact that the donkey spoke. He was mad because the donkey wasn't going where he wanted him to go.
He was so overshadowed by his own feelings and wants.
Yeah.
And then another thing. So I was thinking about this one day, just outside thinking. Do you think, now this is kind of a bringing 2 ends of the string back together to make a knot. The creation and the end, when Jesus comes back and we're all in heaven after Judgment Day. Do you think the new heaven and new earth, that where God has been hiding the Garden of Eden, where the angel's standing, where no man can see the garden and find it, and the tree of life still exists inside of this place, could that be where heaven is going to be, and the tree of life is how we live for eternity?
I'm not sure how I would approach that.
It's just a thought that crossed my mind.
I would have to believe that because of the catastrophe of the flood, Eden wasn't a place that, it was a place of the earth and on the earth.
But if it's hidden now, could it not be protected?
But it wasn't hidden. Now, people knew where it was. When they were put out of the garden, it was the entry was protected by the angels with their swords. But when the judgment of Noah came, the flood, when everything was broken up, the everlasting covenant of creation. Adam broke the covenant by disobeying God, but it wasn't fully broken until God had determined that the thought of man was completely evil and not redeemable, except for Noah and his wife and his 3 sons and their wives. So when all of that took place, then everything that was on the earth was broken up and destroyed. We know where the rivers, or what used to be rivers, we know where they are that circled or surrounded Eden. If it still existed, people might argue about weirdness like other dimensional
like
nonsense or stuff like
Jonathan Kahn, he says realm a lot.
Well, I know that,
but then again,
we know that we know full well that there's a realm that we don't see. It's as near as the air we breathe.
Yeah.
It's all around us, and we know it influences us.
I guess in my head, when I think Eden, even though it was a physical place, obviously they were cast out of it.
Uh-huh.
But I'm thinking in my head like something like that, where everything was perfect and good, and also curious, maybe God's placement so that the rest of history would unfold the way that it's supposed to, and the placement of everything. But I wonder if like that specific place meant something to the Lord for some reason. Like, why was it there that he chose to do it? Unless that's kind of was the center of everything until everything was broken up with the flood.
Well, and it may very well be that would have been the focal point of all things.
I think about little stuff, it's like these little spider webs and kind of.
Well, and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, the imagination does ask questions and wonders, well, what about this or what about that? But all we know is what the Word says, and to go on beyond that, as long as we're not questioning God's sense of logic or thinking, well, maybe he's just messing with us or something like that. The most important thing to keep in mind is that the world we live in today doesn't believe in absolutes. A very large portion of them don't believe in absolutes. They don't believe in, a lot of details we don't even have to talk about. But fundamentally, God created man as his crowning creation, and he made man from the earth that he first created. When he spoke heaven and earth into existence, man was made of the stuff of earth, and woman was made from the side of man, which made her of the stuff of earth, only more peculiarly from his side. Where was I even going?
No absolutes.
No absolutes. We were created special by God to have fellowship with him. He wanted, but he didn't want it to be without choice.
Yeah.
He wanted it to be voluntary. He wanted us to love him enough to communicate directly with him and to hear directly from him. Adam spoke directly with God.
Walked with him in the cool of the day.
Yes.
See, I've heard this argument so many times from people that really don't believe in God, or maybe even not sure if they believe, but they're questioning, which is God's not scared of anybody's questions.
Right.
But they say, well, if God is so loving and so just and right, then why did he make the other tree to produce that fruit of knowledge of good and evil that would kick them out of the garden? And to me, my studies and my personal convictions, the simple answer is this. And you and I've talked about this, we are the only thing created that can choose to live in the purpose God has created us for or not.
That's right.
And so he loved us so much and cares for us so much that it's like me and Jesse were talking yesterday, the day before, about arranged marriages. Mm-hmm. I don't know why we started talking about it, but like back, even today in different countries, you don't have a choice of who you marry.
That's right.
But God wanted to make sure that we fully understood, in spite of the consequence, whatever we chose, it would be a choice.
That's right. That's right.
That's why God loves us so much that he cared enough to give us the choice to love him. Just like I choose every single day to or not to love my wife, to love, honor her, cherish her. It is a choice every single day. And when does things start going wrong and get chaotic and out of order? When we step outside of the order, outside of the choice, and we end up doing the opposite of what we were actually designed to do. And we are meant to design, we are designed and meant with a purpose, and to love, honor, uplift, worship, and in relationship with God. That is what we were meant for. So no wonder why our world is so backwards and crazy right now, because years ago, and this has been since the beginning, obviously, but God's been taking out of things. And when you take God out of it, which is the order we need, which is the love we need, is the correction we need, which is the light to our feet so that we can walk the path safely and walk it correctly. You take that light out and all of a sudden there's nothing but darkness, and then you can't see, you start to trip up and you mess up and the world becomes chaotic. So now we touched on this a little bit more. I don't know if you have more to say, but as far as the idea of creation in the Bible, does it align or conflict with the scientific theories of the Big Bang or evolution?
Every theory, every scientific theory requires multiple billions of years for everything to exist and consist. Even the Big Bang, which seemingly gave opportunity for theological minds to believe, well, okay, it all came from such a tiny, small particle, we could say that was God. Well, but it wasn't. God created everything from nothing.
Yeah.
Wherever nobody has even bothered to try to describe where this infinitely small, it's called a singularity.
Yeah. Where
the singularity came from to begin with, and why, if it had existed for only the theorists, I don't even know if they theorize how long it existed. What caused it to suddenly decide to explode?
They skip over that part because
Yeah.
you would need it to come from somewhere.
Yes, it's got to come from someplace. But inside this singularity, the mass of the entire university, this infinitely small particle of wherever its source was, it already contained the entire mass of the universe. That as it expanded, it coalesced and formed stars and planets and et cetera, and dust and so on and so forth.
That, my friends, is called a miracle.
That's called a wild imagination. Yeah.
And then they want to get on us about trying to explain how God got his start. He didn't. We're kind of trying to say the same thing, except ours makes sense.
Where did God come from? Yeah. Well, it's so neat, and I was thinking about this. The thought had never really occurred to me, but when you think about, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, and the earth was without form and void, etc. But it's, as creation progresses from there, it's almost as though you could think of, say, a balloon or a bubble, if you wanted to, that had a nucleus, and it was this water-covered nucleus that existed inside this expanse that we will never know how large it was. And when we get to heaven, none of that's going to matter anyway. But and then began working from there. He continued. Then the heavens came from that. Evidently, the heaven, what we call the first heaven, is the sky. Yeah. The atmosphere existed beneath the water, because on the next day, God began to separate the waters with that expanse. There were waters above the earth and waters below the earth, still on the face of what we would call your backyard or whatever. But as it progressed, he began to, and it wasn't until, well, I don't remember which day 4, I think, day 3 or 4, that he even put a star in the sky. So,
which is crazy to even imagine that. So
all of the mass of the universe that we have today didn't exist until God specifically spoke it into existence. It wasn't something that was all sitting there waiting for him to sort it all out after he coughed and
chew. Oh.
Yeah, so it wasn't like that.
Oh, those cartoons got it wrong. So that's so. What role does God play in ongoing creation or sustenance of the world, according to the Bible?
When God finished day 6, he said that it was very good. He had made everything that was going to be made from nothing, or from the earth, or from whatever source it was going to be, the fish, everything. And he made it, he created it in a system that was perpetually self-sustaining. It was made to be eternal. It was an eternal environment made to continually sustain life, the life that he had created. It's not something, we talk about it. I had a pastor in First Assembly of Spring, Texas, and one of his challenges from the pulpit was very frequently, he said, I'll give you all the time that you want. You just think about it, pour over it, however many years, decades, whatever it takes, that you would take one day and you would supply everything that God has already supplied for every being, every living creature on the face of the earth and in the water. And obviously, when you start pouring that over in your head and rolling that around, you said, the enormity is just unbelievable. Yeah. But put that back into the perspective that it belongs in. God took care of it through 6 days of creation. He put it all in order.
Yeah, even the leaves falling down, like everything coming down, so then it can go back. It's just a constant circle.
A water cycle, yes.
Just over and over and over again, that everything feeds the ground, that feeds the plants, that give us oxygen, but we're spitting out the carbon monoxide they need. It's like constantly, everything is in constant motion of feeding each other and replenishing each other. And it's like,
yep, absolutely. And then in its original state, before the flood, the condition of the earth, we don't know if there was even such a thing as decay from the original creation. And that's just me pulling that out of my ears. But the fact is that the original creation was made to perpetuate in ways that we can't understand, because our observations, even scientific observations, are observing a broken creation. Creation was broken when the flood occurred. It had to have been shock waves that were known throughout the universe. The water above was broken up and began to fall, and the earth was broken up into great depths, and waters poured up from the earth. Water was covering the earth for 40 days, and 40 days of rain wouldn't do that.
Yeah, I've thought about that before, not thinking about water coming up as well.
Yes.
And it's like, there's no way it can rain. I mean, you could put some inches on, but to cover all the ground and all the terrain and everything, but to be broken and come up, you don't know how much is down there either.
think of the height of the peaks. One of the first sciences that questioned creation was geology, and geology is obviously observing a shattered and broken up earth.
Yeah.
And their assumptions were that the Grand Canyon took millions and millions of years for this little trickle of water to dig down that far, as opposed to the fact that canyon was opened up, and not it only, that water was gushing up out of it, and a lot of what we see as the erosional process that took place was the receding waters over the period of time that it receded. It's really fascinating to listen to a Bible-believing, a creation-believing geologist describe these processes and how they brought us to where we are. But the original geologists were observing how long it took to erode, say, an inch of ground or a quarter of an inch of stream bed in the cycles that were taking place at that time, or the sedimentation in the deltas and the Gulf, and like in the Gulf of Mexico and other areas where rivers are flowing into the oceans, and how very slowly these deposits build up, and they extrapolated that back to say, this is how long this has taken. They look at the structures that we would drill for oil and gas in, how deep they are, and they have many of those formations actually have fossils in them. Well, they're sedimentary layers. They're called sedimentary layers, and the geologists, because of their depth and what they know about the rate of sedimentation and so forth, how could you put 30, I think in the Anadarko Basin, which was where I was most active in my earlier career, was 37 or 38,000 feet of sedimentation at its deepest. Wow. And I think in the Gulf of Mexico, it's even deeper than that.
Man.
From the ocean floor, from the Gulf floor down.
That's a lot.
And you put that into perspective, that's how much of the earth that was gouged out and waters gushed out of to flood the earth to the height of, I don't even remember how many feet it was or how many cubits it was above the highest peak.
Man, the people trying to get into that boat wasn't just because it was raining. The earth was cracking.
Yeah.
The things were breaking up. Water was coming from where it wasn't supposed to. I'd have been shook in my boots too.
Faith and Failures Podcast.